Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today is the 20th of September 2021. Alright everyone, what a weekend, and right now as I'm recording this, a bit of craziness going on, but I'll get to that in a sec. I just wanted to give a quick shout out here that Kofe from the Discord channel has organized another community chat in the Daily Gwei Discord channel, which will be happening this Wednesday at 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, which I know is, I think it's like early morning for the US, and I think lunchtime early Arvo-ish for Europe there, and Asia around the same time. So if you're awake and want to just quick chat to myself, a bunch of others in the Daily Gwei Discord. The last one that we did was quite fun. I mean, there's no agenda or anything. We just like basically shit posting on the channel, and it's just really fun to lay back. And it's a lot of Australians in there because we're all up at that time, of course, after dinner for us. But yeah, be sure to join. I'd love to see you there on Wednesday, 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. This Wednesday, the 22nd of September. All right. Actually, before I talk about that, I just wanted to quickly give a shout out. I did a quick kind of podcast with staking rewards here that's now live on YouTube. I did this about a couple of hours ago, a couple of hours before recording this, where we basically talked about ETH2 staking, Ethereum generally, and EIP 1559 for about 45 minutes. So if you want to go check that out, I'll link it in the YouTube description for you to do so. All right, so I put out this tweet just before where I said, crypto Twitter now macro experts again. So this was in reference to what's been going on in China and the kind of like Chinese real estate companies that seem to all be collapsing, and people are calling for the global financial crisis 2.0, people saying, we're about to repeat 2008, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to say that I know anything about the Chinese real estate market at all, to be honest. I don't know anything about kind of like the companies collapsing. I hadn't heard of them until basically the last few days. And I have absolutely no idea what kind of like long-term effect that's going to have on the crypto market. I think that in the short term, right now, it feels like there's a lot of, I guess, kind of like panic going on. And that's never really a good time to be paying attention to anything. You can't really get a read on the market, let alone just like overall sentiment, because everyone's just kind of like freaking out over it. And I think that's a little bit overblown. It's funny because this stuff has been known about for a few months from what I've seen, but it's just kind of coming to light now because it's playing out in the markets and stuff like that. So that is what people are pointing to as the reason for the crypto sell-off right now. And it's a pretty good reason. I mean, the US kind of like stocks are weak as well because of it. People kind of like worried that this could on-flow onto the rest of the worldwide economy, and it could have a longer term kind of like on-flow effects here. As I said, I'm not an expert in any of this stuff. I have no idea what's going to happen. But that's kind of like the explanation, I think, for why we've been seeing a bit of a sell-off here. But, we'll have to see. The sentiment in kind of like crypto and in the crypto markets is pretty similar to what the sentiment in the stock market is. It's kind of like day to day, up and down, narratives everywhere. Stock market works a little bit differently because they have like open and closing times. Like over the weekend, you can only really trade the futures contracts on for the US stock market, for example. And then I think the market opens in about an hour from now, so 9:30 a.m. Eastern time, and we'll see what the market does in live trading. Like people are saying, the markets are gonna like have a massive sell off because of all this stuff happening in China. And I'm not convinced personally. I don't know. I'm not a trader, so it doesn't really bother me either way. But that's kind of like the explanation as to why, we've been seeing this sell-off recently. And it's funny because whenever I kind of see these sell-offs, I just kind of go to the chart and I quite literally zoom out on the chart. I'm like, okay, I'll switch to the weekly chart. Let's see what the weekly chart looks like. And I know what it's already going to look like because I know what price ETH was a year ago and I know what price ETH is today. And I look at it and I'm just like, this is just funny because there are so many points over time, like not even just the last year, but like let's just say like the last 3 years, for example, of crypto. How many points in time can you point to and remember like how much panic there was back in kind of like the I guess like end of 2018 is a perfect example here when the crypto market in particular was selling off like pretty heavily, and we hit like $80 ETH in December of 2018. BTC went to like 3.5k after going to 20k, and ETH went to obviously $1,400 just less than a year prior. And I don't really remember anything from back then, to be honest. I don't remember the feelings at that time. I don't remember kind of like who I was talking to. I don't remember the sentiment of crypto Twitter. It was much smaller, but I mean, I think I was still reading Reddit back then. I don't remember any of it, to be honest. And that's because it's irrelevant. It absolutely means nothing. Like I mean, I do remember buying some ETH back then, but that's it. And I don't remember all the other kind of like feelings around it. And that's because, as I said, it's inconsequential. It is a short-term narrative thing, and it didn't really matter in the long term. Yes, we had like a longer-term bear market in like 2019 and things like that. But honestly, most of that year, I don't even remember the sentiment, like what people were kind of like feeling. I do remember that people were feeling down about things and kind of like it was just like, down about the price, but the building was still going on and everything like that. And 2019 was a great year for me personally. But the day-to-day happenings, like you just don't remember that sort of stuff. We're not wired to. We actually, I think this is a thing. We're wired to forget the bad things and just remember the good times. Because our brain doesn't necessarily want to just remember the bad times for the rest of our lives. So there's that aspect to it. So times like today, and today isn't even the worst of it. Recently, I mean, May of this year, like, when we kind of like dumped from 4,400 to 1,700 in a week, that was much worse than what we're seeing now. And like even that feels like a lifetime ago now. It feels like a blip, and it's still fresh, I guess, fresher than most things, but you kind of like zoom out and you just remember where we've come from and you know and kind of like seeing this dump today and just like any kind of like dumps in general, you kind of think to yourself, well, I mean, you know, there is sell-offs from time to time. It can't go up forever, but the longer term trend, not for everything, but I believe for ETH and a few other assets is definitely going to be up for, you know, for the foreseeable future, especially in an industry where it's kind of like growing so quickly. And it's funny because we also have like in the US, you know, money printing still going on, other parts of the world as well. There's a Fed meeting this week, I believe, I think Tuesday and Wednesday US time, where they're going to discuss like, I don't know, a bunch of Fed things that could affect the market. And if they say, well, they're not going to taper their money printing, they're going to keep doing it. Well, that could be good for crypto, right? That could be good for markets in general. And then who knows? And if anyone tells you that they can predict what's going to happen on a macroeconomic scale, they're lying to you. Like, no one can predict it. There may be some people who get it right from time to time, but the general trend is that like it's very, very hard to trade macro and trade based on macroeconomic events because there's just so much emotion, confusion, FUD that just flies around. It's just very, very hard to trade these things. And I think what ends up happening is what we're seeing now, where people sell off because they're scared, they're panicking, whatever, and then no one's bidding because they're like, well, I'm going to wait for this to calm down. What's the point of buying now when I know that there's panic in the streets? I'm going to kind of like wait till all this blows over, wait till we understand the situation a bit more, not kind of be reactionary here. So eventually you get to a point where everyone's like, okay, well, I mean, is that it? Like, are we over now? Okay, cool. And then you see the price starts going up again and people are like bullish again. And we've seen this happen in crypto plenty of times. The sentiment changes literally within an hour. The sentiment can change. Like, we can be dumping really, really hard, and then all of a sudden, all these bids come in, right? And you have like all these kind of like big amount of money just come in and buy it and kind of like rocket us back up. And this is exactly what happened when we went from 1,700 to like over 3,000 in like a month. I think it's just hilarious how quickly we went back up after being bearish for a little while, and everyone being like, "Oh, the bull market's over," blah blah blah, whatever. And you know, I remember I was one of the people who were saying I don't think it was over at all, and I still don't think it's over, just because of this kind of like macro stuff. I think in the short term, all the markets will sell off together when there's this much kind of like uncertainty and confusion. But then over the kind of like medium to longer term, it just kind of like corrects itself and all the markets trade independently of each other. But it's funny to see like the correlation between stocks and crypto right now, especially over the short term. But we'll have to see what happens going forward. I still think that later in the year is generally really good for crypto. So I don't see us like kind of being bearish for too long here, especially considering how much is happening and kind of like how much interest is in this space. I don't know. I feel like during these kind of like macroeconomic sell-offs, it's hard to tell short term, but long term, nothing's changed there. But anyway, I'm gonna kind of like wrap it up on the market commentary. There's a bunch of other updates to get through, but I figured I'd just talk about it since it is topical right now. It's something that the Discord channel is actually having a lot of chats about. You know, there's people on both sides of the kind of the discussion there. So it's actually a pretty good discussion. If you want to get involved, be sure to check out the channel there. All right, so Aztec Network have a few updates about Aztec 2.0. So V2 has been live for 6 months already with over $5.5 million being sent through the network since launch and with 1 ETH cap. So you remember that, I think I mentioned this when this first kind of like got released, that there was a 1 ETH cap on what you could do on this network, which obviously severely limited the usage of it, severely limited the amount of capital that could come in, but they're increasing this limit to $100,000 now per transaction. So no more 1 ETH cap. It's now much more than that. It's about, what, 32, 33, 34 ETH, whatever the price of ETH is at a time here, but obviously much more than the 1 ETH per cap there. Well, yeah, here you go. They've actually quantified it. They're saying ZK Money now supports private transactions up to 30 ETH. And 2 REN BTC, 100,000 DAI and 2 REN BTC here, which is cool. So accounts will need to be migrated to kind of like take advantage of these changes. They had audits done for this, and there's bounties for the network as well. So cool to see Aztec still making lots of progress here. I know that they aren't as, I guess, like talked about when it comes to the layer 2 space because they're a roll up as well. But they are definitely one of the most important ones because of the privacy aspect to it. And, you know, they are definitely moving, I guess, probably slower because a lot of this is bleeding edge. They're doing privacy rollups, which is like next level, right? It's on top of what I talked about before, ZK rollups, where it's basically using zero knowledge for privacy within a zero knowledge rollup. It gets complex from there, and you need to make sure the security is paramount. So that's why there's limits and stuff like that. But cool to see them kind of like lifting the limits here and allowing for more transaction kind of throughput. All right, so Tim Beiko put out an all core devs recap thread here that you can read through. But one thing I wanted to focus on with this thread was the merge. So he says here that Mikhail is currently working on the specs for the first interop devnet between execution and consensus clients. You can expect them early next week. So in plain English, this is a spec for basically the execution clients, which is the ETH1 clients, Geth, Aragon, Nethermind, stuff like that, and consensus clients, which are the ETH2 clients, your Prism, your Lightnode, your Taker, and all that sort of stuff. So these specs will be due early next week, which is this week, technically now. And then from there, the DevNet can be built around these specs, and we can have probably maybe a longer standing merge DevNet, which is cool because we need that. I mean, we need all these DevNets and testnets to be done. We need them to be longer lasting so that we can kind of like test everything there is to test about the merge before we can even think about kind of doing any kind of, I guess, like mainnet related stuff, or essentially giving a date for mainnet. As I've said before, I expect it to be in kind of like, not to be this year. I think it's like a 50-50 chance it's going to be Q1. It's like a coin toss at this point. Q2 I can see being like a pretty high chance. So if it doesn't happen in Q1, I can see Q2 being pretty much like a 90+% chance that the merge happens. Probably more than that, if provided nothing kind of goes wrong, nothing fundamental happens. But so fundamentally wrong happens, but it's kind of like always hard to tell because with Ethereum core dates and layer 2 dates, there's always something unforeseen because of these. This is all bleeding edge research and development. This is not something that's been done before. There has never been a merge of networks of this size. I don't think there's ever been in crypto, there's ever been a merge between a proof of work and a proof of stake network, especially given the fact that it's very risky because of the fact that, okay, well, you're basically firing the miners, right, with this merge. So are they going to do anything? Are they going to do anything to mess with the network leading up to the merge? How do we defend against that? And there's actually a few different things that they've thought of. I saw one thing where they said instead of using a block number instead of setting a block number to determine when the merge fork happens, they would base it on the mining difficulty of the network. I think that's what I read. So there are already lots of discussions kind of happening around this, a lot of thoughts happening around this. But essentially, as I've kind of like mentioned before, once Altair ships on ETH2, which is happening, I think, early October, then all of the ETH2 and ETH1 researchers and developers are going to be focusing on the merge. Pretty much, I think almost all of them will be focused exclusively on the merge. So we're going to have like the, I guess, smartest people in Ethereum working on this. It's going to be great to see how it all comes together and shakes out. And I'm confident they can deliver this in a timely manner. I don't think it's going to be a thing where we have to wait till like Q4 of next year for this to happen. I'm actually pretty, I know I said 50-50 for Q1, but I actually think that we can get it done in Q1. But I say 50-50 because until I guess I see more of these dev nets and test nets up, it's kind of like a coin toss. But, Q2, I could see it definitely being, definitely not being later than Q2. But don't quote me on that because I know, we'll get to Q2 and then people will be like, oh, you said you don't think it can go later than Q2 and it gets delivered in Q3 or something. So yeah, definitely don't quote me on that. But I always like to be optimistic about these things. But yeah, I mean, the rest of this thread kind of talks about this in more detail and got a link to a bunch of different resources. So I'll link this tweet in the YouTube description and you can go check it out. All right, some really exciting news out of Optimism, and this is the news that they were teasing that I was talking about last week. So it's not that their whitelist is being removed as I speculated last week, but for good reason. So they introduced a blog. So they put a blog post together here titled "The Future of Optimistic Ethereum," and in this blog post they detailed that they're going to be upgrading the network in October to be able to be EVM equivalent. So not only EVM compatible, it's going to be EVM equivalent, which means that any contracts that run on Ethereum Layer 1 using whatever tooling that's available, using whatever infrastructure is available, is going to run exactly the same on Optimistic Ethereum. Now, this is something that Arbitrum doesn't have. Arbitrum has their Arbitrum virtual machine, but it doesn't have EVM equivalence. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does make it a little bit more difficult for developers. But with EVM equivalence on Optimism, it'll actually be super easy for developers to just like one-click deploy to Optimism what they've already got working on Ethereum Layer 1, which is amazing. I mean, it's honestly pretty awesome that Optimism has been able to do this for their optimistic Ethereum network. And as I said, it's going live in October. And as I said before about this is a good reason for the the whitelist to still be in place. Well, you obviously don't want apps deploying to your old infrastructure because then you'd have to migrate them across to the new infrastructure. So why not wait until the upgrade is in place, then remove the whitelist and kind of open the floodgates? And I actually think this is going to be an amazing amount of kind of like apps are going to come to Optimism as soon as they do this. So say like mid-October or something, they didn't give a date in October, but say it happens in like mid-October, they upgrade the network, and then like a week later, once it's all running well and good, they say, okay, well, the whitelist is gone, have at it. You're going to see all the top Ethereum apps just deploy here straight away. If it's truly, as they say, one-click deploy, EVM equivalents, no need to change anything at all, no need to kind of like point to different kind of like infrastructure providers, or no need to worry about your tools not working with it. If it's as they say here, true EVM equivalence, I can see Optimism getting a lot of adoption very quickly. So I'm super excited about this. I think it's really awesome that they've been able to get to this point in time. This is pretty awesome from an engineering perspective as well, from what I've seen. Like, I don't know the details on the engineering side, of course. I'm not a developer. But from what I've seen, developers are really excited about this. Engineers are really excited about this. And, that makes me excited. So great to see this announcement from OE. And this doesn't mean that kind of like Optimism's network isn't growing right now either. I checked the Uniswap stats the other day. They're doing on average, I think, $10 million a 24-hour volume, which is really awesome for a layer 2 network, especially for a layer 2 exchange on a layer 2 network that's not open just yet, right? It only has a bunch of other apps on there like Lyra and Synthetics, and I think a few others like 1inch, but nothing like what we have on mainnet. Same goes for Arbitrum. They do have a bunch of other apps that Optimism doesn't have right now, like Curve and such, but definitely not the bustling ecosystem that we have on layer 1. That's going to take a bit longer to kind of roll out there, but still very awesome to see this. So I guess like congrats to the Optimism team for getting this across the finish line. I guess like in the next few weeks. This is really awesome, and I wish them the best on kind of like getting this to mainnet. All right, so CryptoFees put out a brief update last week saying that they were previously underreporting Arbitrum's transaction fee revenue. So with the updated data model that they're using, you can see that Arbitrum actually had significantly higher fee revenue than Bitcoin on September 12th. So this was, I guess, the date that everyone kind of like rushed onto Arbitrum, and there was like all these farms happening and everything like that. But you can see here that Arbitrum did $612,000 worth of 24-hour revenue on September 12th, which was over $200,000 more than Bitcoin's entire network. So this is crazy. Layer 2s are going to do more fee revenue than individually than Bitcoin will do as like an entire network. And you can see, obviously, Ethereum has been doing like much greater fee revenue, like 40 to 50x greater fee revenue than Bitcoin has been doing. And the reason why I think this is funny, not just because I want to poke fun at Bitcoin, but Bitcoin relies on transaction fees for security. Ethereum does not, right? And, these layer 2s do to an extent because they need to generate revenue in order to pay layer 1 for its security. But that's not an issue because these layer 2s are going to be used heavily because there's incredible demand for them, because there's incredible demand for blockchain compute, which is what these layer 2s do, like the execution, compute, smart contracts, cheap kind of like transactions, all that sort of stuff. So from that perspective, Bitcoin doesn't have that at all. Bitcoin just has the demand to move Bitcoin around. And this is what's always kind of been funny to me. If you're saying that fee revenue is going to secure Bitcoin, and the only way Bitcoin fee revenue can go up is if people use the network, and the only way people can use the network is to move Bitcoin around. But then you say that Bitcoin is for holding, Bitcoin is for hoarding, it's digital gold, you're not actually supposed to do anything with it. But then you say, oh, but you can use Lightning Network to pay for your coffee. All these kind of things just like clash together and don't make sense. They don't reconcile. So from that point of view, I actually think Bitcoin's fee revenue is not going to get much higher from here. I think it's going to keep stagnating or kind of like reducing. And I think a lot of that activity is just going to go to Ethereum like it already has. People are going to use Ethereum layer 2 networks to move Bitcoin around as well, whether that be in the form of wrapped Bitcoin or whatever. It doesn't matter. If they're going to do arbitrage and stuff like that, they're going to just bypass the Bitcoin network altogether. And, it's really bearish for Bitcoin in my eyes. But it's just funny to see like how the layer 2s are already doing so much. I mean, even Optimism on that day did $331,000, almost as much as Bitcoin. And, if you add those layer 2s together, almost $1 million. Then you add all the other ones that aren't tracked right now, like DYDX and Diversify and Immutable. They're still paying gas fees because they're roll-ups. And you just add all that together, that's millions of dollars of fee revenue, which is probably more than, like, just adding all the layer 2s together, that's probably more than any of the kind of like other smart contract chains, including, like you can see here, BSC, including all the other ones you've heard of and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, this to me, I know transaction fees are a pain for a lot of users, and I'm not saying they're good. What I'm saying is good is that low individual transaction fees, but high aggregate transaction fees. So it's okay if users are paying like, under $1 for swaps on these. Once we get there, like under $1 for different kind of swaps, or even a couple of dollars for swaps. But it's not okay for users paying $50 for a swap. But it's okay if the aggregate volume or the aggregate revenue of these layer 2 networks is very, very high, because they can do more transactions than Ethereum layer 1 can do, which means you have small individual transactions, high aggregate transaction fee revenue, small individual transaction fees and high aggregate transaction fee revenue. And that way it just works very, very nicely. So yeah, cool to see this. Cool to see Crypto Fees updated. It is definitely one of my favorite sites. I visit it quite regularly. But yeah, I am looking forward to seeing what other updates they put forward here as well. So Nifty Island, this is a project that I've been kind of like monitoring for quite a while. I think I mentioned that like on the first day they kind of came out on the refuel, but they put out a kind of like last week a sneak peek of their terrain generation system. So for those of you who don't know what Nifty Island is, they're basically trying to build a virtual world, a virtual metaverse, so people can have their own kind of like islands and kind of like shape it to how you want it to be, have your own kind of like metaverse items on there, and kind of like live in this world. And you can see here there's like a terrain generation system or a terraforming system for your like world or for your island and stuff like that. And this is obviously an early sneak peek and stuff like that, but this is really cool to see. I love this sort of stuff. I was a big kind of like Minecraft player back in the day. I really loved building stuff in Minecraft and just like letting my imagination run wild. And if I get to do that in kind of like a crypto-based game where I can kind of like create things or buy and sell items and stuff like that, it just adds a whole nother element to it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Nifty Island shakes out. And, I'm really looking forward to having my neon palm, which I got on display there, and my kind of like katana sword too, my Nifty Island blade that I can kind of display on my island as well. So I'm looking forward to playing around with this when it does eventually come out. I don't think there's any dates yet around this, but I mean, you can join their Discord channel, join their community if you want to get involved at this early stage as well. All right, so mStable Staking V2 is now live, so you can now earn MTA rewards, swap fees, and BalancerLabs LP tokens by staking your MTA if you have that there. So disclosure here, I'm an advisor and investor to mStable, just wanted to get that out of the way. But staking V2 has been in the works for quite a while. There was staking V1 that kind of like, I guess had existed since I think late last year. And staking V2 brings with it a bunch of different features, and there's also a migration guide as well here if you want to check it out. But basically the TLDR, as I said, the users can stake their MTA to earn more MTA rewards and balance up pool tokens. There's vote delegation. There's a cooldown of 3 weeks for withdrawal, so just good to keep in mind there. And there's also quests to earn multipliers that scale earning and voting power as well. And I think there's some NFTs as well involved too, so quite kind of similar to the Zappa Quest features as well. So if you want to read the full details of this, there's a blog post here that'll be linked in the YouTube description, of course. But cool to see mStable still chugging away here. As I said, like I'm close to the project, and I'm just really loving liking all the stuff that's coming out of them lately. All right, so last thing to talk about was something that I wrote about in the Daily Gwei newsletter today. And I put this tweet out, I think like on the weekend, where I said Ethereum is changing the world and most people have no idea that it even exists. This is funny to me because whenever someone outside of crypto asks me like what I do for a living, I always start with, and I hate that I have to do this, but I always start with, oh, do you know about Bitcoin? Because, I just assume that 9 times out of 10, these people are probably never going to have heard of Ethereum before. But Bitcoin gets covered extensively within the media, usually for bad things, like whether they cover scams or exchange hacks or like the price going down or the price going up, right? But Ethereum doesn't get much coverage, or hasn't traditionally. It probably gets more now than it used to. But I always start with, have you heard of Bitcoin? They'll be like, oh yeah, I heard of it here and there. And then I'll be like, oh, okay, well, I work in the Ethereum ecosystem. And they're like, oh, what's Ethereum? Is that like Bitcoin? And I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. Sassel's going into turbo kind of like lecture mode about Ethereum. And I usually get carried away with it like I do on the refuel sometimes, where I'll just kind of like red pill someone on Ethereum, but I'll give them the lowdown of like what it is, what you can build in it and stuff like that. And some of them will not really care or lose interest, or most of them actually probably lose interest rather quickly, and kind of like it goes above their head, because this stuff is inherently complex to kind of like understand and kind of like get your head around, depending on kind of how deep you want to go here. But some people are genuinely interested and they want to know more about it, and like, holy shit, like this is awesome, like how is this even possible? And the funny thing is, as I said here, like most people have no idea that Ethereum is doing things like DeFi, where DeFi is not just some kind of like thing that we're playing games in to earn some yield. DeFi is working to basically, as Kathy Wood put it on the Bankless podcast, hollow out the financial system, like just disrupt it completely and replace it with something radically better. It's not just DeFi, it's NFTs, like reinventing culture, reinventing the way people kind of like, coordinate around culture, around art, around collectibles, things like that. Same with DAOs and social tokens, and then the whole Web3 space. Like all of this is happening in a bubble at the end of the day. Like we're all in a bubble that most of the world has no idea that even exists. They can't even see our bubble. They just kind of like see some things on the media sometimes about like talking about our bubble, being like, oh, the price went up, or like someone got scammed here, or Mark Cuban talked about this. Like if a celebrity talks about crypto, for example. Other than that, there's no kind of like, they don't come into the bubble, they don't peek into it, they don't even see it, and they miss out on a lot of this stuff. And to be fair, I don't think most people actually have to worry about a lot of this stuff or care about a lot of this stuff. They're going to be using it eventually anyway. Like pretty much everyone will be using DeFi eventually without even knowing about it. People will be using NFTs without even knowing about it. People may even be part of a DAO without even knowing about it. It's just all going to be, I guess, like abstracted away from the end user at the end of the day. And that's how we get mass adoption anyway. So it's not a big deal there. But still, when you really think about it and you kind of like really come to terms with the fact that Ethereum is changing the world, and like, most people just like have no idea it's kind of like happening in parallel to them living their lives, just like a lot of other stuff. I mean, to be fair, I have no idea about other things that may be changing the world right now. As much as I love kind of like watching all the space stuff happen, space-related travel happen, I don't have time to pay deep attention to it. So I'm probably missing a lot there in that bubble. And those people in that bubble probably feel like they're changing the world, which they definitely are. And then there's, people in the medical industry, people doing research on anti-aging stuff. Like I don't keep up to date with the day-to-days of that because I just don't have the time. But I know it's there. It's interesting. But, the people inside that bubble probably think to themselves, holy shit, this is going to change everything. And like really feel it. Just like how I feel about Ethereum, and just like how a lot of you would feel about Ethereum as well. So I don't know. I just thought that was something interesting. I actually tweeted this out at almost 3 a.m. my time. So maybe this was just me half asleep in bed being like, oh my God, Ethereum is so awesome. I'm going to tweet this out to everyone. But anyway, I think that's it for today, everyone. So thank you again for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give that video a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.